We talk about inflation all the time. It's this, invisible force that shapes our budgets, our savings, our entire economy. And we measure it with one really important number, the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. But here's a question for you. What if that number, the one we rely on for so much, isn't telling us the whole story? What if it's actually wrong?
I know that sounds like a pretty bold question, but just think about it. The one number that influences everything from Federal Reserve decisions to your own salary negotiations, maybe even your Social Security check, well, it might have some serious flaws baked right into its calculations.
Okay, so let's start with the basics, the official definition. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says the CPI tracks the average price change for a market basket of goods and services. Sounds straightforward enough, right? But what exactly is in this basket?
The easiest way to picture it is like a giant nationwide shopping cart. The government goes out and fills this cart with thousands of different things. We're talking groceries, gas, rent, airline tickets, you name it. Then they just track how much it costs to buy that exact same cart of stuff over time. If the total price goes up, well, that's inflation. It's a simple idea in theory. But in the real world, things get messy. Life isn't static. We change, technology changes, and a fixed shopping cart really struggles to keep up. And that creates some major blind spots, flaws that can give us a distorted picture of what's actually happening in the economy. So let's unpack the three biggest flaws here. Once you get these, you'll see why the pros never rely on just the CPI alone.
All right, the first one has a kind of technical name, but the idea behind it is something you and I do every single time we go to the store. It's called substitution bias.
And this right here? This is a perfect example. Let's say the price of beef goes through the roof. What do? Well, you probably start buying more chicken, right? You substitute. But the CPI, with its fixed basket, doesn't see you do that. It just keeps on tracking the price of that super expensive beef, which makes inflation look a lot higher than what you're actually paying.
Okay, flaw number 2 has everything to do with innovation. I mean, our world is constantly changing, and the economy is always creating brand new things.
Just think about the smartphone. When it first showed up, it wasn't in the government's official shopping cart. So for years, while smartphones were getting way cheaper and better, the CPI completely missed out on that huge price drop. It wasn't captured in the data, which again tends to make inflation look higher than it really is. And that whole innovation thing, it leads us right into the third big problem. How do you measure when something just gets better? This is a fantastic way to think about it. The laptop you buy today for $1,000 is a completely different beast than a $1,000 laptop from 5 years ago, right? It's way faster, has more memory, a better screen. You're getting so much more bang for your buck. The CPI tries to adjust for this, but it's really hard to do. More often than not, it just sees the same price tag, not the huge leap in quality. So if the CPI has all these problems, are we just flying blind? Well, not exactly. And here's the twist. The people in charge, policymakers and economists, they know all about these limitations. And that's exactly why they don't just stare at one number. They've got a whole dashboard of tools to get the real story.
So let's take a look at these other gauges that help paint a much clearer picture of what's going on.
First off, even within the CPI, there are two versions you'll hear about. There's headline CPI, which is the big number that includes everything, even crazy volatile stuff like food and gas prices. But because those can swing all over the place, economists often prefer to look at core CPI, which pulls those out to find the more stable underlying trend. But here is the real secret. The number the Federal Reserve really cares about, it's not the CPI at all. They use a completely different measure called the Personal Consumption Expenditures Price Index, or PCE for short. So what's the big deal with the PCE? Well, it's all about how it counts things. The CPI mainly focuses on what we pay for directly out of our own pockets, so things like rent get a ton of weight. The PCE, on the other hand, looks at the bigger picture. It also includes costs that are paid for us, like healthcare through an employer. Because of that, healthcare matters more in the PCE and housing matters a little less. And this is the key takeaway. You know that 2% inflation target you always hear the Fed talking about? That's a PCE target. The PCE also does a better job of updating its basket, which helps it account for that substitution bias we talked about, switching from beef to chicken. That's a big reason why PCE inflation numbers usually come in a little bit lower than the CPI. Okay,
I know this can all sound like a very technical debate for economists, but these tiny differences in measurement, they have a huge real-world impact on the finances of millions of Americans.
And here's where the rubber really meets the road: Social Security. The annual pay raise that retirees get, the cost of living adjustment, or COLA, is tied to a version of the CPI. There have been serious proposals to switch this to a different version, called the chained CPI, which is designed specifically to account for that substitution bias.
So just look at the differences makes. The Senior Citizens League ran the numbers comparing the current formula with the proposed chained one over about 17 years. The difference is pretty stark. Benefits would have grown almost 4 percentage points less under the proposed change. Now, that might not sound like a huge number, but over that time, it adds up. For the average retiree, it would have meant getting over $6,000 less in benefits. That's a real-world impact. Small changes in the formula, compounded year after year, mean huge differences in your wallet. So where does that leave us? After all this, is there such a thing as a perfect way to measure inflation?
Well, here's what to take away from all this. The CPI is still a super important economic thermometer. We need it. But it's not a perfect measure of your personal cost of living, because everyone's basket of goods is different. And finally, by understanding its flaws and knowing that other measures like the PCE exist, you're just a more informed citizen. You can see the bigger economic picture. Which really just leaves us with one final thing to think about. In an economy like ours that's so complex and is always changing, can we really expect one single number to ever tell the whole story?